room in the pack and play.
All right, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, ma'am. If you would please state your name for the record.
Gracie, Anna, Perry.
And you were known at one point as Gracie Hall, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And Perry, is it your married name?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mike Astrom. I should introduce myself after you just did. And I'm one of the attorneys that represents the family of Addie Abley and her estate. And I'm here today just to try to get some information from you. And I don't mean for this to be a painful experience. I don't mean for this to be a traumatic experience. I don't want you walking out of here hating me. It's not my intention. Sometimes the questions I may ask might be tough. It might bring back bad memories, or you might think I'm being mean or trying to criticize you. And that's not my goal. My goal is, and I think your attorneys also, we just want to get accurate, truthful information. And so I'm going to ask you some questions and have some rules that I would like you to follow to make it a lot easier. One of the problems that we've been having today has been sometimes questions getting cut off or some staggered with the video. If you don't hear a question properly, or if the video cuts out or staggers, please let me know. And I'll be more than happy to repeat that question as many times as it takes for you to understand or to hear it properly. We don't want you answering questions with uh-huhs or ums or shakes of the head. So, and it's human nature, everyone does it. So try to remember, if you're answering a question, to answer with yes or no, so the court reporter can take that information down. If at any time during this deposition you need a break, please do not hesitate to say, hey, I need a break. The one rule is that you have to answer the question first. So if there's no question pending, you want to take a break, that's your prerogative. We've been taking breaks about every hour or so. So if we're still here at 4:15 or so, we'll take a break around then for about 5 minutes or so, just to give you a chance to clear your head a little bit. You just took an oath, so obviously we expect the testimony here to be truthful. And this is the only opportunity that I have to speak to you before this case, if it should go to trial. So what I ask is, if we're going through this and you remember additional information about a question that I asked earlier, or if you realize that maybe you gave an inaccurate answer to a question, don't hesitate to go back and say, hey, you asked me a question about 20 minutes ago on XYZ. I just remembered some additional information about that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Please do it, because, you know, like I said, we want the truth. And, you know, if the information isn't complete or is, you know, not intentionally, but is inaccurate, that's not going to help us. So do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had your deposition taken before?
No.
Okay. Now there's a lawyer in the room today with you, correct?
Yes.
Or are there actually two lawyers? Is Mark still there?
Just one. He decided he had enough fun, I guess.
Okay. Now the lawyer that's there with you today, is he your personal attorney?
No.
All right. So you're not paying him to be there?
No.
Do you know who he represents?
Close to home.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to meet with the lawyer prior to today?
No, I met him today.
Okay. Before your deposition, have you had the opportunity to review any medical records regarding Addie Abley's care?
Yes.
And what did you review? Do you remember?
I reviewed the wound care and her eating, toileting, and just mobility in general.
Okay. Did you look at any photographs related to this case?
No.
Did you do any independent research about any topics that we might discuss today?
No.
Before we went on the record, you were talking about you have a 10-month-old at home, and you said you were a stay-at-home mom. So you're not working right now?
No.
Okay. At some point you did work at close to home, correct?
Yes.
And that would be close to home 5, correct?
Yes.
When did you work there?
I don't recall my start date. I believe it was in 2017.
And when did you leave?
March 2019.
Okay. And in 2018, did you provide care to Addie Abley?
Yes.
And what was your position at close to home?
I was an STNA. So I was an aide.
Okay. And when did you receive your STNA training?
2012.
And where did you receive that at?
Rock Springs Rehabilitation Center.
Okay. And did you work at Rock Springs also?
Yes.
And now, is that a skilled nursing facility?
Yes.
So that's a nursing home, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And close to home is an assisted living facility, correct?
Yes.
What's the biggest difference that you notice between a nursing home and an assisted living facility?
At a nursing home, you have almost all of your residents are total care or an assist of some sort.
And what about assisted living?
You have a lot of independent residents.
Now, Addie Abley was not one of those independent residents, was she?
When it comes to certain things, yes.
All right. In 2018, she pretty much needed assistance with almost every single activity of daily living. Fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as an STNA working at close to home in 2018, your obligation was to provide good and safe care to the residents there, correct?
Yes.
And part of that is understanding the regulations that you have to follow for that care, correct?
Yes.
And are those things that you covered in your STNA training?
Yes.
And fair to say that you have, as an aide, much more hands-on contact with the residents than the nursing staff does, correct?
No.
You don't?
Not at close to
Why
home.
do you say that? So what was different about close to home?
The aides worked with the nurses. The nurses.
So the nurses did
I'm sorry, what?
the nurses did a lot of hands-on care?
Yes.
Do they help, as an aide, part of your responsibility would be to help residents getting in and out of bed, correct?
Yes.
And you said the nurses also helped out with that?
Yes.
And was Addie Abley a resident who needed help getting in and out of bed in 2018?
Yes.
As an aide, you would make sure that residents are eating properly, correct?
Yes.
And in 2018, was Addie Abley a resident who needed help with eating?
Yes.
And what level of help did she need with eating?
She could eat certain things herself, like if it was a sandwich or something, she could do that herself. But sometimes she would be a feed.
And when you say feed, what do you mean by that?
Like we physically fed her.
Okay, so you take the spoon and put it up to her mouth and make sure that or do your best to make sure she eats it, right?
Yes.
Do you recall Addie being the type of resident who, if you had the ability to spend extra time with her, she would eat better?
Can you ask that again?
Sure. Did you ever have difficulty feeding Addie?
Yes.
did you find if you had extra time and could spend more time with her that she would eat better?
No.
What sort of things, when did you have trouble? What sort of instances did you have trouble feeding her?
I recall towards the end of her stay, she would refuse her food.
Now, when you're feeding residents such as Addie, how do you chart that they're eating or they're refusing or you know, how much they ate? How does that done?
We have aid sheets, and
Okay.
I can't remember specifically what the sheets would say, but I know P was for poor and F was for fair, G good.
Yeah. And what was considered good?
If she would eat half or more.
And who instructed you on what those words meant?
We went through aid training before we were hired on. Well, I guess we were hired on, but we had to watch maybe 18 hours of videos, and it was part of one of the videos.
And who was in charge of that training?
At the time, Erica.
Erica Faye or Storms?
Yes.
Okay. So she would turn would she do any classroom instruction or was all video?
It was all video.
Right. And the videos were not made by close to home, were they?
No.
Okay. And so you would chart the food and that was all paper, right? There was no computers?
Right.
All right. And do you know who was responsible for reviewing those documents, those aid sheets?
The nurses that were working
Right. Do you know how often they reviewed those sheets?
daily.
So it was the responsibility of the nurses to review those sheets daily.
Correct.
And they would do that with all the charting that aides did? It would be daily checks?
Yes.
And how do you know that they were doing that?
I worked multiple shifts, or I would work split shifts, so I would witness it.
So you would see them actually looking at the aid books?
Yes.
Now also, hygiene care is something that an aide would be responsible for, correct?
Correct.
So that would be changing diapers or cleaning up after someone has a bowel movement?
Yes.
How often, with someone who couldn't verbalize, how often were you supposed to check up on them to make sure they weren't wet?
Every 2 hours.
Right. And what about somebody who could verbalize? You just waited for them to say something to you?
Still every 2 hours, and when they would say something.
Okay, where was Addie on that spectrum?
Every 2 hours.
All right, she was not verbal?
Towards the end, no.
Okay. What was she able to do towards the end in terms of communication? Do you recall?
She would talk. A lot of it didn't make sense.
Just sort of mumbling?
Yes.
Was that before or after she had her fall?
After.
When I say fall, I mean the one that she had the broken hip. So it's after?
Yes.
And with regard to your responsibility as an aide, it would be the nursing staff's responsibility to supervise you, correct?
Correct.
Now, I assume you're familiar with a woman by the name of Sharon Hartwig, correct?
Yes.
Who is Sharon Hartwig?
The owner?
Hmm. Do you know how many close to home facilities there are, aside from close to home 5?
No.
Now, when you worked, did you work 12-hour shifts or 8-hour shifts? Or you said you worked split shifts?
In the beginning, it was 12-hour shifts. And 2018, I went down to about 1 day a week, sometimes every other weekend. I took on another job.
So your time in 2018 was limited at close to home.
Yes.
All right. What other job were you? Was it a healthcare job or a totally separate job?
It was a home care private pay job.
Okay. And so you cut your hours back at close to home.
Yes.
All right. When you were working more frequently, do you recall how often Sharon Hartwig would actually physically be at close to home 5?
Yeah.
How often do you think per month she was there?
Once, sometimes twice.
So once or twice a month?
Yes.
Now, in 2018, were you there enough to be able to form an opinion as to how often she was there?
No.
Okay. When you saw her there once or twice a month, before 2018, do you know what she was doing when she was there? What sort of things she would do?
I know while I was there, when I see her, she would do paperwork or go over charting.
Did she ever do any direct patient care that you saw?
No,
All right. Now, she is an RN, correct?
I don't know.
Now, we've already said that you were supervised by the nurses. Do you know who the supervisor was for the nurses?
I don't know.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Charlie Kunkel?
Yes.
And who is Charlie?
Maybe co-owner?
Okay, and did you see Charlie there on a regular basis?
Not on a regular basis. I would see him come with Sharon. They could have came when I wasn't working.
Okay. When Charlie was there, do you know what he did?
No.
Right. Are you familiar with Heartland Hospice?
Yes.
What do you know about Heartland Hospice and what they did at close to home with regard to Addie Abeley's care?
They would come in and do her showers, dressings. Sometimes they would sing with her, or they would pray.
So there were aides that came in from close to home? From Heartland Hospice?
I'm sorry, say that again.
There were aides that would come in from Heartland?
Yes.
Now, they weren't there every day, correct?
No.
And the nurse that came in, is it fair to say, or do you recall her being there about once a week?
No, but she could have came in when I wasn't there.
Okay. Now, when the aides from Heartland weren't there, was it the responsibility of the staff at close to home to provide Addie's care?
Yes.
Okay. And so the day-to-day care was still provided by close to home, correct?
Yes.
So you said you started there sometime in 2017, correct?
Yes.
So Addie was already a resident when you got there.
Yes.
Do you know, in 2018, would you have any idea of, just based upon your observations, what percentage of the residents that were there had dementia issues?
I would say 90%.
Okay, so there are quite a few had dementia issues.
Yes.
Okay. And were those dementia, was it varied, some mild, some severe? Were you able to say how bad the dementia was for overall?
In my opinion, I think it was mild.
Okay. Now, it's the job of the nursing staff, you know, the LPNs and the RNs, to provide hands-on medical care to the residents, correct?
Yes.
Right. And the aide's responsibilities, we already talked about some of the stuff you do. If you observed, for example, a bruise or some sort of injury on a resident, who would you report that to?
The nurse.
And would you chart that in your aid book?
Yes.
Okay. And when an order came in from a doctor in terms of, you know, for example, turning a patient, how would you know that that order was in place?
The nurse would let us know.
Right. Was there a requirement that you check the chart or the care plan every day?
If any care plan was changed, there would be a note. So I guess yes.
All right. Now, when you say the nurses told you about the orders, how would they tell you?
They would just tell
I mean,
us.
it'll be verbal, nothing written.
Verbal and written. They would write it on the resident's chart.
Now you talked about, you know, putting stuff in the chart. Do you agree that keeping a good chart is important?
Yes.
Now, for you as an aide, you would use the chart to figure out, as we just discussed, turning and repositioning, correct?
Correct.
And bathing and hygiene needs, like how often they're supposed to be bathed.
Yes, that's in their chart.
Now, do you know if there was strike that, there was no dietitian on staff at close to home, correct?
Correct.
All right, everyone ate the same food?
Yes, unless someone was sick.
Okay. And if they were sick, what would they do?
They would get an alternative meal, which was generally soup.
Okay. Now, anytime you did something with a resident, it was expected that you would chart that, correct?
Yes.
And fair to say that you should never chart something that you didn't do?
Correct.
Okay. Would you say that residents at close to home had a right to accurate charting?
Objection.
I don't understand the question.
Whenever you chart something, it's always important to make sure that it's accurate, correct?
Yes.
And that's very important for resident safety, correct?
Yes.
Right. Now, as part of your training, you watched all the DVDs and stuff, the 18 hours. Did they also discuss specific policies and procedures for close to home?
Yes.
And were you expected to know those policies and procedures?
Yes.
Right. And where were those policies and procedures kept?
In the filing cabinet.
All right, so if you had a question about something, you could go in the filing cabinet and look up the policy.
Yes.
And what sort of training did you receive on those policies?
Once we were finished with our videos, Sarah came in and she would go over the policies with us.
Do you recall what the most important policies were that Sarah went over with you that she stressed the most?
Lost connection.
Did you hear me? Uh-oh.
Can you repeat the question?
Is that working?
Whitney, what was the last thing I said?
The last thing we heard here was when you, did you recall what the most important policies were that Sarah went over with you that she stressed the most, and she said HIPAA?
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear your answer. So so HIPAA was the most important policy?
Yes.
Okay. And what did Sarah tell you about HIPAA? Do you recall?
Basically, no discussing patient care or anything about a patient with anyone other than another employee or the nurse. She stressed no cell phones, no taking pictures.
And how often did you have training when you were at close to home after your orientation?
Sometimes monthly.
And who did the monthly trainings?
Sharon.
Did you ever receive training on caring for people with dementia?
I don't know.
How about on accurate charting? Did you ever receive any training on that?
Yes.
Yes, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And what sort of training did you receive on accurate charting?
Basically that everything you do has to be charted. If you didn't do it, don't chart it.
Did you receive training on turning and repositioning?
I don't know.
So based upon your training, close to home considered charting to be very important. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And that would go for the aides as well as the nurses, correct?
Yes.
So if you did something it was expected that you would make a note of that in the chart, correct?
Objection.
Yes.
Do you agree that it's important to supervise residents at a place like close to home?
I don't understand your question.
You know, everyone at the facility, I think we've already addressed this, but everyone had different levels of need, correct?
Yes.
Like some folks could go walk around, could leave the facility on their own, correct?
Correct.
And then others like Addie Abley couldn't come anywhere near doing that, correct?
Right.
Would you say somebody with Addie Abley's limitations, it was very important to make sure that someone like that is supervised more than someone who could, you know, go out and walk down the street?
Yes.
And fair to say that it's everyone's job. When I say everyone, I mean the administrator, Sharon, the maintenance guys, whoever. It's everyone's job to make sure that proper supervision is in place.
Yes.
And in order to properly supervise, would you agree that you have to have enough people in the building to do it?
Yes.
So you cut out. What was your answer?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Whitney, we're having some problems with the connection this time. I don't know why it's all of a sudden glitching out, but it's getting really bad. Are you noticing that too?
Yes.
We haven't had any like freezes or any reboots or anything, Mike, but it's a little worse than it was before, but we had a couple moments this morning and they worked themselves out.
Yeah, I had a little thing pop up on my screen that said Whitney's bandwidth is low. So I think it's coming probably from your end, but okay.
The internet?
What's that?
Is that the internet, or what does that mean?
Yeah, it's the internet. It's Ohio University. I expect nothing less. Okay. We're not going to be here too much longer, so hopefully we can get through this.
On the record.
What's that?
I think your comment was on the record. Just I'm kidding.
My comment about OU.
Yeah.
Hey, we're I'm glad we're getting reception at all this long.
All right, folks like Addie Abley, they can say, I mean, actually all the residents there, close to home 5 was their home, correct?
Correct.
So it's important that as staff members there, that they be treated like they were in their own home and treated with dignity, correct?
Yes.
So as part of maintaining the dignity of the residents, as an aide, you would consider it very important to make sure that they're monitored and like diaper changes happen on a regular basis?
Yes.
Like, would it ever be acceptable to have someone go into the dining room with dried feces under their fingernails and on their hands?
No.
all the residents at close to home had a right to a safe environment, correct?
Correct.
And based upon your training as an STNA, are you aware that that right is guaranteed by both Ohio and federal law?
I'm not aware.
Would you say that Addie Abley had the right to a safe environment every day that she was there at close to home?
Yes.
And assisted living residents should never be neglected or abused, correct?
Correct.
And it's everyone's responsibility at the facility to make sure that that doesn't happen, correct?
Jack, go ahead, Nancy.
Correct.
All right. So to avoid, having someone be neglected or abused, would you agree that if there's care ordered in the care plan, that should be done?
Yes.
That if someone needs assistance with activities of daily living, that assistance is provided?
Yes.
That they be toileted on a regular basis?
Yes.
That they be given adequate hydration and fluids? Hydration and food?
Yes.
That if they are at risk for falling, that they're monitored properly to avoid them from unnecessary falls?
Yes.
What sort of training did you receive on dehydration? Did you receive any?
I don't recall.
What about on nutrition? Did you receive any specific training on proper nutrition?
I don't remember.
Right. Hey, Matt, can we take like a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Yeah, something's going on outside. I want to check real quick. Hold on 1 second. All right, we'll
All
take
right.
about a 5-minute break. We're not going to be too much longer. All right, is everybody back?
We are.
Okay. Kind of moving to 2018, you said you weren't working that much in 2018, right?
Right.
Were you working around the time that Addie had her fall and broke her hip?
I was not there when it happened, but I was still on the schedule.
Okay. Do you recall the first day that you came back after she had her fall?
I do not.
What were you told about the fall?
That she fell in the dining room?
Right. Were you told it was an unwitnessed fall, that nobody saw it?
I don't remember.
Right. How much hands-on care did you give to Addie after she had her fall and broken hip?
Very little.
All right. Any idea, if you could even guess, how many days you were there? She was there for about 3 weeks after the fall before she moved. Any idea how many days you might have worked in those 3 weeks?
I don't know.
All right. Do you recall turning or positioning Addie after May 20th before June 12th?
I remember turning her, yes.
And how did you know to turn her?
It was in her care plan, and the nurses told us
All right. And how often were you supposed to turn her?
every 2 hours.
Right. And when you turned her every 2 hours, was that charted in the book?
Yes.
Did any of the nursing staff ever come to you and say that she was not being turned enough?
I don't remember.
What do you remember about Addie? You know, maybe in 2018, towards the end, what type of person do you remember her being?
She wasn't able to do much at all. I mean, she barely talked. She barely ate.
What was her personality maybe earlier? Do you recall what her personality was like before she started her dementia started advancing a little bit?
She was typically a happy person.
Was she able to move around on her own? In 2000, I guess maybe
I don't
when you started in 2017, do you remember her moving around?
In her chair, yes.
Okay, so she'd be in a wheelchair.
It was a Jerry chair, but yes.
Okay. Is a Jerry chair able to be, can you move on your own inside of a Jerry chair?
I don't understand your question.
Dude, a Jerry chair, does someone have to push you or can you move by yourself in a Jerry chair?
You can move by yourself in a Jerry chair, but it's extremely difficult.
Okay. Do you recall if Addie can move in her Jerry chair by herself?
There was times when she would use her feet and move around a little bit,
Okay.
but by little bit, she didn't go down the hallway by herself, no.
Okay. Do you recall ever being told by the nursing staff that Addie was a high fall risk?
Yes,
And who told you that? Do you remember?
the nurses.
And when they told you that she was a high fall risk, what do you think they expected you to do with that information?
Basically supervise her.
Okay. Did they give you any specific instructions to follow?
Not that I recall.
But you took those comments to mean that she needs extra supervision, correct?
Correct.
Were you present when Addie had any of her other falls prior to the one where she broke her hip?
No,
Are you aware that she had about 4 falls when she was at the facility?
I'm aware that she fell, yes.
Okay. Fair to say that someone like Addie, based upon her dementia, might participate or engage in activities that probably aren't safe for her?
Objection. Go ahead and answer.
I don't understand.
Do you think Addie had poor safety awareness?
I don't know.
Should someone like Addie have been left completely alone in an area?
You can't sit with her the whole time you're there.
But she should be watched carefully though, correct?
Correct?
Do you blame Addie for anything that happened to her?
I don't know.
When you were working on your shifts, how many other aides were there on average working with you?
2 others.
All right. How did you split up the residents? Did you have specific people you dealt with, or how was that handled?
One person would normally be in the kitchen, and then the other 2 would team up.
And the person in the kitchen, what were they doing?
Normally cooking, preparing food of some sort.
What sort of training did you receive on how to make the food?
Someone would come in, I believe from the health department, and go over food training.
Okay, so like sanitary things like that?
Yes.
And in terms of a menu, like what you were supposed to make every day, who made that menu up? Do you know?
Sarah, and then Erica.
You cut out the Sarah, then Erica, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And would it just be one aide making food for everybody in the facility?
Typically, yes.
All right. Did you happen to see Addie Abeley's wound shortly before she left close to home?
Yes.
How did that appear to you?
I can remember it started out very small, and then it was bigger.
Did you notice it smelling at all?
I don't remember.
Was the size of her wound concerning to you?
Yes.
Did the nursing staff at close to home seem concerned about her wound?
Yes.
Do you know why Miss Abeley left close to home on June 12th?
No.
Are there any questions that I've asked you that you would like to go back and revisit?
Your last question. You
What was
asked if
that?
I knew why she left. You asked if I knew why she left.
Sure.
I don't know why, but I believe it was because she went to another facility.
Okay. But you don't know why she went to the other facility?
No.
Okay. Let me go through my notes, but I think we might be done.
Want to sit tight or want us to come back in 2 minutes?
No, it won't be long.
Okay.
All right, nothing further. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you. And Whitney, I'll get you those exhibits.
Okay, thank you.
Safe to close it out?